Hey guys, before we get started, this is Justin from the future just popping in to leave a brief message. I didn't get to finish editing this video. I finished the entirety of the voice stuff and I'm really happy with how it came out, but I'm going on vacation and I just didn't have time to finish editing. So it was either basically scrap it or put it out in this form. So for that reason, much of this video is just Lego Star Wars gameplay. I'm sure some of you will be okay with that. Some of you won't be. I just want you to know if this is your first video, most of them aren't like this. Either way, in the comments, please let me know what you think of my argument. Let's get started. So Star Wars Twitter was of course up to its usual antics the other day, and there was a big fight over one topic that I thought could make for an interesting rambling video. Now you guys may or may not know this. If you watch the streams, you probably do. I'm getting ready to go on a vacation, so I'm trying to get you fine people as much content as I can before I go away. Consider this somewhat of a rambling video, but we're talking about a very interesting topic, and that is, was Mace Windu, to be frank, a dick? Was Mace Windu partially responsible for the fall of Anakin? Was he fully responsible? Was he largely responsible, or was he not responsible at all? As far as I can tell, this discussion was started by a dude named Matt Ramos, who said, "Changed my mind. Mace Windu is the reason Anakin turned to the dark side." Then there were some counter tweets as well, including this one, who said there are two things that made Anakin fall: Darth Sidious and Anakin's own choices. If you blame Mace Windu or Padme, you're objectively wrong. First of all, I'm going to say that individual, and by the way, don't harass or bother anybody in this video, is objectively wrong, because you can't easily dismiss an argument as objectively wrong without actually taking the time to discuss it. Then goes on to say, Star Wars is a franchise about choices. Anakin chose the dark side, then he chose to come back. The prequels explicitly show Palpatine was pulling all the strings, etc., etc. George Lucas made this clear. In my opinion, this is someone who's kind of misreading the prequel trilogy. To say that Star Wars is about personal choices just seems to miss the entire message of the saga. Star Wars actually goes out of its way to show that fundamentally Anakin Skywalker is a good person. That's why the first episode takes place with him as a nice child who doesn't do anything wrong, who's got no flashes of darkseid. He's a fundamentally good person. Let's talk about what happened to Anakin. He was taken by essentially a cult. Let's call them what they were. The Jedi Order were a cult, and a cult that denied basic human feelings. Were the Jedi evil? No, I don't think you can make that argument. I think the Jedi definitely had the best intentions, but the prequels seem to go to their way to show that a lot has happened and that the Jedi are nowhere near their zenith in terms of power or even morality. This is something laid clear in other sources like the Revenge of the Sith novelization. It talks about how, in a way, even just being on Coruscant, a world full of decadence and greed and inequality and all of these things, has corrupted the Republic and also, to a degree, the Jedi. Anyway, let's talk about what actually happened to Anakin, why he turned to the dark side. Anakin has several problems, and if you really believe that George Lucas's message here was that sometimes people make the wrong choices and become bad, you're totally missing the point of Star Wars. And I think you probably are fundamentally missing the point of the movies. People always ask, well, why didn't George Lucas just start with Episode 2, or why not just remove the Phantom Menace? That's because the Phantom Menace, although it does have some problems, serves an important role. It's supposed to show Anakin before he's been corrupted by life. And I say that even knowing that Anakin spent the first years of his life as a child laborer working as a slave with an explosive thing in his head that would blow up if he tried to run away. Still, even with all of that backstory with Anakin being so powerful in the Force, George Lucas makes the conscious decision to not have Anakin have a little flash of anger in the Phantom Menace. He is a fundamentally and simply good character. Let's look at the things that happened to Anakin after the Phantom Menace. Does he decide that he wants to be all-powerful and rule the galaxy, and that's what drives him down the path of evil? No, that is a side effect, arguably, of him becoming evil, but his first steps to the dark side happen because of the situation that he's thrown into, really to no fault of his own. He's taken as a grown child and brought into the Jedi Order. He doesn't fully succumb to the Jedi mind washing because he's too old, and thus he has very human and real emotions like we all have, including, hey, maybe it's not epic if my mother is a slave, and also, maybe it's not great that my mother was killed and tortured by Tusken Raiders and I didn't do anything about it despite fully having the power to do something about it. I find it very odd that people argue that the Jedi as they appear in the prequel trilogy are meant to be a symbol of pure light and goodness. Obviously, the Jedi stand for good, but the Jedi Order as it existed is flawed, and I think it's pretty clear that George Lucas was trying to show that. Now, of course, there is an element of personal responsibility there to Anakin. Yes, the system puts him in a bad place. The system has him seeing the death of his mother and not being able to do anything about it. The Jedi telling him that he shouldn't care about it, that people die, that's what it is. This, by the way, isn't a philosophy that George Lucas is arguing. George Lucas doesn't believe that you shouldn't care if people die. However, it's also clear that Anakin doesn't respond even with these issues correctly when he slaughters the Tusken Raiders. That is a mistake. That was the wrong action. That, even with the systemic issues that he suffered, may be understandable, but it's not excusable. Ultimately, Anakin has to wear that one. That's on him. Why do I know that? Well, George Lucas himself makes this pretty clear. You can look at some of his quotes about love, or you can just look at the Star Wars movies themselves. Anakin is finally redeemed through the power of love. Love between father and son. Love which would have clearly been prohibited by the Jedi Order of the prequel trilogy. If not openly prohibited, at least these weren't the types of relationships that the prequel era Jedi were trying to cultivate, and it ended up being the most important thing in the entire galaxy. So that's one thing. The system fucks Anakin up when it comes to his mother, but the other thing you have to keep in mind as Star Wars is that it's about teaching children and teenagers how to live their life. That's something that George Lucas has said consistently, and I think one message that's often ignored is about how to love people in a healthy manner. Anakin clearly does not love Padme in a healthy manner. He loves her very much, but the love has become obsessive. This is even more evident in the Clone Wars with, for example, the Rush Clovis arc, and guess what? You also get to put this one on the Jedi. Anakin doesn't have examples of healthy love in his life, so the options are either to do the thing that most humans just can't do, which is not love at all, or love without having a clue what that actually means. Being really unhealthy about it, not being able to talk to anyone, having no support whatsoever, and surprise, surprise, he's manipulated by a predator. Palpatine is written in the Revenge of the Sith novelization like a pedophile, and that's because he identifies a victim without a support structure, someone who is vulnerable, someone who's fallen through the cracks. Not to say that all victims or all perpetrators are like that, but it's a very clear connection with how Palpatine is portrayed. Someone had a really good comment under one of my tweets earlier that I want to read out. He said, "Haven't read the novelization yet, but I always struck by Obi-Wan's 'You were my brother, Anakin' line, because it was clear to me that Anakin needed a father, not a brother, and Palpatine slid into that role that Obi-Wan left available." Here's what happened to Anakin. Anakin chooses to become a Jedi when the only other option is to become a slave on a desert planet with an explosive on his neck. Now, yes, to be true, he was freed either way, but he was still the child of a slave. He was sold into slavery once. In my opinion, things on Tatooine were not looking very bright for him. He chooses to believe a Jedi when he believes that being a Jedi means becoming an unkillable wizard like Qui-Gon Jinn. When he's in that order, he can no longer apparently love people. He can't love his mother. He can't love Padme, who he's already started to fall in love with, even though that age thing is a little bit weird. And to say that the Jedi Order has no responsibility for creating this weird cycle, for creating this inhumane structure, is just not reasonable. Yes, Anakin is ultimately responsible for everything he does, starting with the Saiyan people massacre and more as things get worse. He's a flawed individual, and he has to eventually come to terms with that, and he does somewhat redeem himself. But it's not just him, and there are others involved. Mace Windu is a major part of the Jedi Council. He's also been subject to the same conditioning that Anakin has, but he's also perpetuating that. He's not only perpetuating that, he's arrogant. He's a dick to Anakin, the person who's been told since he's 9 that he's the chosen one, who's basically winning the Clone Wars and is now being denied seat on council. He's embarrassing Anakin. He doesn't trust Anakin. He never gives Anakin any of the love that the other Jedis also failed to give him. So yeah, Mace Windu is partially to blame, and Mace Windu is not presented as a sympathetic character in the movies. You partially blame him for Anakin's downfall. Hey, I get it. I think he deserves a bit of that blame, as does pretty much everyone in Anakin's life. Those are just my thoughts, though. I'm sure you guys will let me know whether you agree with my take, whether I'm right broadly, or whether I'm completely wrong about the message George Lucas was trying to tell. Let me know all of that and more down below. Until next time, guys, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.